I'd been married to Sarah for over 12 years. We had a simple start, just two college sweethearts who bonded over a shared love for music and adventure. In those early days, we spent our time traveling, exploring towns and cities big and small, always on the lookout for the next place to make a memory. Back then, our marriage felt unbreakable, solid as a rock. Sarah was my best friend, the one who knew me inside and out. But somewhere along the way, life got complicated. We bought a house, settled into our careers, and had our two kids, Abby and Jake. The spontaneity that once defined us faded, giving way to the steady routine of bills, school schedules, and work responsibilities. We became like so many other couples, the kind we used to laugh at in our younger years. Two people swept up in the everyday grind, slowly drifting apart. Looking back, I can see the signs were there. Sarah was often distracted, glued to her phone more than usual, and started spending long hours at work or with her new friends from yoga. I didn't think much of it at first. I trusted her. But as time went on, the distance between us grew, and a gnawing feeling I couldn't shake started settling in. One evening, after a particularly long day, I lay awake, thoughts racing. Sarah was asleep beside me, breathing steadily, completely at ease. I watched her for a while, wondering if I was just overanalyzing things. Maybe she was simply exhausted from work, caught up in the day-to-day challenges we all face. But there was something off in her smile, something unfamiliar that I couldn't ignore. The next morning, as she got ready for yet another late meeting, an urge to follow her hit me out of nowhere. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being ridiculous. But the doubt was there, whispering in the back of my mind, nudging me to find the truth. As she left, I grabbed my keys and jacket, waiting a few minutes before heading out after her. She drove across town and pulled into a quiet neighborhood I didn't recognize. I parked a few cars away and watched as she stepped into a small cafe. My heart pounded as I waited. Moments later, a man joined her, greeting her with a hug that lingered just a little too long. I watched as they took a seat by the window, their faces lighting up with smiles I hadn't seen from her in years. They looked comfortable, almost too comfortable, like they had a closeness that wasn't meant to be shared with anyone else. That night, Sarah came home as if nothing had happened. She greeted the kids, helped with their homework, and joined us for dinner with her usual calm smile. But I couldn't stop replaying what I'd seen, the way she looked at him, the way they laughed together. It was the look she used to give me. I didn't confront her that night. Part of me wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, that he was just a friend. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. In the weeks that followed, I kept my suspicions to myself, watching closely for anything that might either confirm or clear away my doubts. Sarah kept up her usual routine, always busy, always on the move. Her phone became an inseparable part of her, and she'd grown more secretive, angling the screen away whenever I was nearby. One night, as she sat on the couch scrolling through her messages, I noticed a familiar name pop up on her screen, Mike. I felt a surge of anger mixed with a sick sense of betrayal. Mike was a guy she'd mentioned only once, a new friend from a yoga retreat months ago. I hadn't thought much of it back then, assuming it was just casual small talk. But now, the pieces were falling into place, forming a picture I didn't want to acknowledge. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. While Sarah was out with the kids, I took her phone from the nightstand and went through her messages. My hands shook as I read each line, each word confirming my worst fears. Mike, can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. Sarah, I know. I've been thinking about it all day. Mike, next week, same place? Sarah, yes. I'll make an excuse to stay late at work. The truth hit me like a blow to the gut. This wasn't just some fling. It was something deeper, something that had been going on for months behind my back. That night I hardly slept. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how things had come to this. I thought about all the moments we'd shared, the life we'd built together, and questioned if any of it had been real. The betrayal cut deep, leaving me feeling hollow, broken. I knew I had to confront Sarah, to ask her why she'd done this, but I wasn't sure if I could handle hearing her answer. Part of me wanted to pack up, walk out, and never look back. But another part needed closure, some understanding of why she'd chosen to tear down everything we'd built together. The next morning, after the kids had left for school, I found Sarah in the kitchen, going through her usual routine, preparing her coffee as if it were just any other day. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and approached her, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and sadness. "Sarah," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." She looked up, taken aback by the weight in my tone. "Sure," she said cautiously. "What's on your mind?" I held her gaze, feeling that familiar rush of hurt and anger rise inside me. "I know about Mike." For a moment, she seemed genuinely surprised, as if she hadn't expected me to find out. But then, her expression shifted, her face hardened, and she set her coffee mug down, her eyes becoming unreadable. "How long has it been going on?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "How long have you been lying to me?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Noah, I didn't mean for this to happen. It just did." I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of her words settle over me like a storm cloud. "That's not an answer, Sarah. I deserve to know the truth." She let out a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping as she finally met my gaze. "It's been a few months. I never meant for it to go this far, but…" I felt trapped, disconnected. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. Her words felt hollow, like a flimsy excuse trying to justify a choice that had wrecked our lives. I wanted to yell, to make her understand the pain she'd caused, but deep down, I knew nothing she could say would ever make it right. "So what now?" I asked, my voice cold. "Are you leaving us for him? Do you want to be with him?" She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "No. I don't want to leave. I never wanted this to happen, and I don't know how to fix it. I'm so sorry." Her apology hit me like a slap in the face, a reminder of everything that was now lost. I looked at her, the woman I once loved, and realized that there was no going back. The trust, the foundation we built our lives on, was shattered, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. The days after our confrontation felt like a blur. I was numb, just going through the motions of life without feeling anything at all. Each morning I'd get up, help the kids get ready for school, go to work, and then come back to a house that no longer felt like home. Sarah and I barely spoke, each of us avoiding the other whenever possible. Our kids, Abby and Jake, sensed the tension immediately. They started asking questions, their young eyes filled with worry as they picked up on the silence hanging between us. I did my best to reassure them, to keep things normal, but it was obvious they knew something wasn't right. They were too perceptive not to notice that their parents weren't even talking anymore. One evening, after I'd put the kids to bed, Sarah came into the living room. She looked exhausted, worn down in a way I hadn't seen before. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, but then the memory of her messages with Mike, the way she looked at him, came rushing back, and any sympathy I had vanished. "We need to talk," she said softly, her voice almost pleading. I nodded, feeling a fresh wave of resentment surge up. "Go ahead." She took a deep breath, sitting down across from me, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Noah, I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust, and I can't change that. But I want to try. I want to try to fix this, if you'll let me." Her words hung heavy in the air, and I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could she think this was something we could just fix? That trust, that sense of security, it was gone, shattered by her choices. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" I asked, my tone icy. "How do you plan to fix the fact that you've been lying to me for months? That you've been seeing another man while I've been here, raising our kids, building a life that clearly didn't mean the same to you?" She looked down, guilt etched across her face. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, Noah. I know that. But I can't just walk away from this, from you and the kids. I want to make things right. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me a chance to prove I'm sorry." I stared at her, this stranger who'd once been the love of my life, now sitting here begging for forgiveness. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her that chance, if only for the kids. But another part of me, the part that spent sleepless nights haunted by her betrayal, knew that forgiveness wasn't something I could offer so easily. I need time, I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, but I need time to figure out what I want. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I understand. Take all the time you need. The next few weeks were a fragile balance between avoidance and hesitant attempts at conversation. Sarah moved into the guest room, and we settled into an uneasy coexistence. She signed up for therapy, going to weekly sessions and even suggesting couples counseling. But I wasn't ready for that. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready to sit across from her in a room, hashing out what felt beyond repair. Instead, I threw myself into my work, finding some comfort in the distraction it provided. I started staying late at the office, taking on extra projects, anything to keep myself busy and away from home. When I wasn't at work, I was with the kids, taking them to the park, setting up movie nights, anything to bring a sense of normalcy into their lives. One evening, as I was tucking Jake into bed, he looked up at me, his little face etched with worry. "Dad, are you mad at Mom?" he asked softly. I hesitated, feeling a lump form in my throat. "No, buddy. I'm not mad. We're just going through a tough time." He nodded, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "Will it get better?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. I could only hope that one day, somehow, it would, even if it didn't look like he expected. Around that time, the thought of divorce became harder to ignore. I'd wrestled with it for months, but now it felt like more than just a fleeting idea. It felt real. I'd tried pushing through the pain, holding on for the kids, but the truth was, I couldn't see a way forward. The foundation of our marriage was gone, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. So, I started researching lawyers, looking up the divorce process, and what it would mean for the kids and our finances. It was a hard, sobering reality, something I never thought I'd face. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this might be the only way to truly move on and find a fresh start. One evening, I sat down with Sarah, ready to have the conversation I'd been putting off. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice steady. "I've tried, Sarah. I've tried to move past what you did, but I can't. Every time I look at you, I see what we lost, what you took from us." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at me. "Noah, please. I know I made a huge mistake, but can't we try? For the kids?" I shook my head, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me. "This isn't just about the kids, Sarah. It's about us, about the fact that I can't trust you anymore. We can't rebuild what's been destroyed." She broke down, covering her face with her hands. "I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." I nodded sadly. "But you did. And now we both have to live with that." The next few weeks were a series of painful, necessary steps. We began the process of separating our finances, dividing assets, and arranging custody. We agreed to share custody of Abby and Jake, wanting to keep things as stable as possible for them. It was a grueling process, each decision a reminder of the life we'd once shared, now reduced to legal terms and paperwork. Telling the kids was one of the hardest moments of my life. We sat them down together, explaining that we'd be living in different houses, that things would change, but that they'd still have both of us. Abby, being older, took it the hardest. She cried, asking questions we couldn't answer, why we couldn't work things out, why we couldn't stay a family. Jake was quieter, struggling to understand what was happening. Watching their reactions, seeing the hurt in their eyes, was a pain unlike any I'd ever felt. I wanted to protect them, to shield them from the heartache, but there was no way to soften this reality. In the months that followed, we settled into a new routine. Sarah moved into a small apartment nearby, and the kids started splitting their time between our homes. The arrangement felt awkward at first, with moments of tension and unspoken resentment. But gradually, we found a rhythm, a way to coexist for the sake of the kids. For the first time, I started to feel some peace. It wasn't easy, There were still days when the pain was raw, and memories of what we'd lost haunted me. But I was learning to live with it, to accept this new life. I found comfort in small things: the laughter of my children, the quiet of my own space, the freedom to make choices that were just for me. I reconnected with old friends, started focusing on my health, and even picked up hobbies I'd left behind years ago. These small acts felt like pieces of renewal, reminders that life could go on and that happiness was still out there. One evening, as I watched the kids playing in the backyard, I felt a strange mix of emotions. As I watched Abby and Jake laughing in the backyard, a mix of emotions washed over me. There was sadness for the life we'd lost, but also a quiet gratitude for the strength I'd found along the way. The betrayal, the heartache, it was all part of my story now, a difficult chapter that had taught me lessons I never imagined I'd need. But seeing my kids' faces light up with happiness, I realized I was moving forward, one small step at a time. I wasn't the same person I'd been before, but I was stronger, more resilient. For the first time, I felt a real sense of hope, a belief that I could build a new life, one shaped not by the past but by the possibilities ahead. Months went by after Sarah and I signed the final papers, and in that time, I began to see life through a different lens. The silence in the house, which once felt unbearable, became a source of peace, a reminder that I was finally free to shape my own future. There were no more whispered phone calls, no more secrets, just me, my kids, and the promise of a new beginning. Surprisingly, the kids adjusted quicker than I'd expected. Our routine settled into something familiar, and although it hurt to see them splitting time between two homes, I could tell they were finding their own peace in the change. Abby, my oldest, would still ask questions, searching for answers I couldn't quite explain. Jake, still young enough to adapt without much questioning, seemed happy, especially with the extra time and attention I could give him now. One weekend, when the kids were with Sarah, I found myself alone in the house, surrounded by reminders of the life we'd once shared. I spent the weekend clearing out old photos, boxing up memories that no longer held the same meaning. I kept a few for the kids, but most went into storage, a farewell to the life I was ready to leave behind. In the evenings, I'd sit by the window, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, it had all shaped me, forcing me to confront parts of myself I'd ignored for years. I came to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting or pretending things hadn't happened. It was about accepting the scars, learning from them, and finding strength in the resilience they'd given me. That weekend felt like a turning point. For the first time, I felt a true sense of closure, a release from the anger and resentment that had weighed me down. I was ready to move forward, to rebuild, to live a life that was honest and true to who I was becoming. In the months that followed, I took small but meaningful steps toward a fresh start. I began reconnecting with old friends, grabbing coffee or visiting favorite spots around town. These friends, who drifted away during the busy years of marriage and raising kids, welcomed me back without question, offering warmth and support when I needed it most. I also explored new interests, things I'd set aside in the early years of my marriage. I signed up for a photography class, something I'd always wanted to try, and found real joy in capturing simple, everyday moments. Seeing life through a new lens, learning to appreciate the beauty in quiet, unremarkable moments, felt grounding. These small acts of rediscovery made me feel whole, present. The life I was building was modest, simple, but it was mine. And with each passing day, the pain of the past faded, replaced by a sense of pride in the progress I'd made. One Saturday, while I was at the park with the kids, I ran into an old friend from college, Katie. We'd been close back then, sharing late nights of studying and endless talks about life's big questions. She'd recently moved back to town, and as we caught up, it was like no time had passed at all. Katie had always been warm and genuine, and seeing her now, with that same easygoing spark in her eyes, felt like a comfort I hadn't realized I'd missed. We spent hours talking, watching the kids play, sharing stories about life's twists and turns. She, too, had been through her own challenges, and there was an unspoken understanding between us, a bond built from shared experiences. As the afternoon turned to evening, Katie mentioned wanting to organize a reunion with some of our old friends, a chance to reconnect and remember simpler times. I agreed, feeling a spark of excitement I hadn't felt in years. It was refreshing to think about reconnecting, about laughing and reminiscing without the shadow of the past looming over me. In the weeks that followed, Katie and I grew closer. We started spending more time together, sometimes with the kids and sometimes just the two of us, catching up over coffee and talking about the ups and downs of the years gone by. There was no rush, no need to define anything. It was simply a friendship, a connection that felt honest and easy. Through her, I began to see myself differently. I realized I was no longer just a man marked by betrayal and heartache. I was a father, a friend, someone rebuilding his life with purpose and hope. And slowly, I began to open myself to the possibility of new beginnings. One evening, as Kate and I sat by the lake, watching the sun sink below the horizon, she turned to me with a serious yet kind expression. "Noah," she said gently, "I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm grateful for this, for the chance to reconnect, to see you finding yourself again. It's inspiring." Her words struck a deep chord within me. That simple statement held everything I'd been working towards. I wasn't looking for someone to replace what I'd lost with Emma. I was searching for myself, for that strength and happiness I once knew, and through reconnecting with Kate, I was reminded of who I'd always been, despite the scars. "Thank you, Kate," I said, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I didn't realize how much I needed this, just to feel like myself again. She smiled, and we sat in silence for a moment, watching the last light slip below the water's edge. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of peace, an assurance that life was on the right track. As time passed, my relationship with Kate grew, but we took it slow, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. There was no need to rush. We were simply enjoying each other's company, both of us on our own journeys of healing and rediscovery. For the first time since my marriage had ended, I felt a real sense of happiness, a belief that life could be good again, that I could feel whole once more. My past would always be part of me, but it didn't define me anymore. I'd found a way to move forward, to build a future not overshadowed by betrayal but illuminated by resilience. Looking at my life, my children, my friends, and this new chapter with Kate, I realized I was exactly where I needed to be. I had faced the pain and heartache, and I'd come out stronger, more grounded, and deeply grateful. The journey hadn't been easy, but it was mine, and that was enough. Thank you all for joining me on this journey. Your support and encouragement mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more stories, and remember, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and sometimes, it's brighter than you ever expected.